Welcome back to the World Model Podcast. In the last episode, we talked about how AIs are learning to dream. In today's podcast, we're going inside the mind of a dreaming AI, specifically DeepMind's Dreamer series, and why this represents a fundamental shift in how machines learn. Let me start with a story that blew my mind. In 2020, DeepMind published a paper about an AI called Dreamer V2 that learned to play Atari games. Now, Atari games might seem simple, but here's what's incredible. This AI learned to play at superhuman levels while using 100 times less data than previous methods. How? It practiced in its sleep, literally. But what does practicing in sleep actually mean for an AI? Let me break down three key components that make this possible. First, we have what's called the representation model. Think of this as the AI's sensory system. It takes raw pixels from the game and compresses them down into a compact representation. This, like your brain, taking all the visual information from your eyes and turning it into meaningful concepts. Ball, paddle, score. Second, there's the transition model, or what I'd like to call the imagination engine. This is where the magic happens. Given its current compressed understanding, the AI predicts what will happen next. If the ball is moving right toward the paddle, it imagines the ball bouncing back. Third, we have the reward model. The AI's sense of what's good or bad. It learns to predict whether an action will lead to positive outcomes, like scoring points. Now, here's the beautiful part. Once the AI has these three components, it can close its eyes, so to speak, and practice entirely in its internal simulation. You can imagine thousands of possible futures and learn which actions lead to success, all without touching the actual game. Let me give you a human analogy. Imagine you're learning to play chess. The old way would be to play thousands of real games, making moves and seeing what happens. The world model way, you'd study the board, understand the rules, and then practice entirely in your imagination. You'd visualize moves and counter moves, developing strategies without ever touching a physical chess piece. That's what Dreamer V3 does, but at a scale we can barely comprehend. Now, you might be wondering, how good are these internal simulations? Are they perfect? The answer is fascinating. They don't need to be perfect. They just need to be good enough for learning. In fact, researchers have found that even somewhat inaccurate world models can dramatically accelerate learning. The AI develops what we might call useful hallucinations, simulations that are close enough to reality to teach valuable lessons. But here's where it gets really interesting. For real world applications, Dreamer V3 isn't just playing games. The same architecture has been applied to robotics, where every real world trial is expensive and time consuming. Imagine a robot learning to walk. The old way it tries to stand up, falls over, tries again, falls over thousands of times, potentially breaking itself in the process. The world model way is the robot develops an internal physics simulation, practices walking in its mind, and when it finally tries in the real world, it already has a good idea of what works. We're seeing this right now in labs in Berkeley and Google. Robots that can learn complex manipulation tasks with just a handful of real world trials because they've already practiced thousands of times in simulation. Now, let me hit you with today's controversial take. I believe that within 2 years, every serious AI project will incorporate some form of world modeling. The efficiency gains are just too massive to ignore. We're talking about reducing training data requirements by orders of magnitude, which means faster development, lower cost, and more capable AI. But there's a dark side we need to talk about too. What happens when these internal simulations become so accurate that we can't tell the difference between the simulation and reality? What if an AI develops a flawed world model that leads to a dangerous behavior in the real world? These aren't theoretical questions, they're being debated in research circles right now. In our next episode, we'll explore how world models are already being used in self-driving cars and why this might be the key to truly autonomous vehicles. But for now, I want you to remember this. The Dreamer series represents more than just technical progress. It represents a fundamental shift from AIs that react to AIs that imagine. From machines that learn by doing to machines that learn by dreaming. The, the implications are just staggering. We're not just building better AI, we are building AI that builds better versions of itself through internal simulation. That's all for this episode of the World Model Podcast. If you're finding this valuable, please share it with one person who understands where AI is heading. Follow me on Twitter for daily breakdowns for the latest world model research. The revolution isn't coming, it's already here, and it's practicing in its sleep.